All right, welcome. Let's dive right into an explainer on one of the absolutely most fascinating shifts in 20th century philosophy, Ludwig Wittgenstein's language game theory, and specifically how it applies to religious language. Now, whether you're gearing up for your A-level philosophy revision or, you're just genuinely curious about how humanity talks about the divine, this is a crucial concept to get your head around. So, to kick things off, let me ask you something. How would you explain the rules of cricket to someone who knows absolutely nothing about the game? I mean, just imagine trying to explain what a googly or a wicket is to a total beginner. If you don't actually understand the rules of the game, the actions on the field make no sense at all, right? It literally just looks like people running back and forth between wooden sticks. So keep that core idea of understanding the rules in mind, because it's basically the key to everything we're going to discuss today. Here's our quick roadmap for this explainer. First, meaning is use. Second, the language game theory itself. Third, religion is a game. Fourth, the strengths of the theory. And fifth, the challenges and criticisms.
Okay, starting with part 1, meaning as use, and the big shift in perspective.
So, Wittgenstein actually made this massive U-turn in his philosophical career. Early on, he was a huge influence on the logical positivists. He championed what's known as the picture theory, which basically said language absolutely has to represent observable facts in the real world, like the cat is on the mat. If a sentence couldn't be verified by what we physically see, he thought it was completely meaningless. But then, years later, specifically in his posthumously published Philosophical Investigations, he completely shifted gears. He realized that function matters way more than literal truth. He famously declared, "Don't ask me for the meaning, ask for the use." To really illustrate this new perspective, Wittgenstein used this amazing analogy. He wrote, "Think of the tools in a toolbox. There is a hammer, pliers, a saw, a screwdriver, a ruler, a glue pot, nails, and screws. The functions of words are as diverse as the functions of these objects." Words might look totally similar written down on a page, just like tools sitting next to each other in a box, but they do completely different jobs. You wouldn't use a saw to hammer a nail, right? So you shouldn't judge one type of word by the rules of another. Building on that whole toolbox idea, Wittgenstein pointed out the multiplicity of language, to basically call out his old colleagues in the Vienna Circle. Our language is just so much richer and more diverse than merely stating scientific facts. We use language to give orders, to tell jokes, to describe things, to thank people, to curse, and, really central to our topic today, to pray. These all perform entirely different functions. I mean, asking for scientific proof of a joke makes just as little sense as asking for scientific proof of a prayer.
Moving right along to part 2, the language game theory and what are known as forms of life.
Wittgenstein used another really fantastic analogy, the locomotive cabin. Picture looking inside a train cabin. You see a bunch of handles that all look pretty much the same, right? They're all meant to be grabbed. But one is a crank, one is a switch for the brakes, another is a pump. A superficial understanding, just knowing, hey, these are handles, is totally useless. If you don't know the specific function of each handle, well, that train isn't going anywhere. In exactly the same way, to understand a word, you absolutely have to know the specific convention it belongs to.
Let's put it another way. Have you ever tried playing rugby using the rules of Monopoly? It would be pure chaos. You'd literally be tackled to the ground while trying to pass go and collect your $200. Wittgenstein argued that philosophical problems pop up precisely when we accidentally mix up the rules of different language games. Meaning only comes out of context. You have to observe the conventions of the specific game you happen to be playing at the time. So the really crucial point here is how this completely changes our view of truth itself. This connects deeply to the coherence theory of truth. This is the view that statements are considered true if they fit with other statements and beliefs that are internally consistent. Within a specific game, truth isn't about perfectly matching some external physical reality. It's determined by how well it fits with the other rules of that exact same game. All right, part 3, religion as a game, and why participating is essential to understanding. To really ground this in our topic, we need to bring in the philosopher D.Z. Phillips. He took Wittgenstein's theory and applied it directly to religious belief. Look at this great quote from Phillips. "It is not the task of a philosopher to decide whether there is a God or not, but to ask what it means to affirm or deny the existence of God." What Phillips argued is that religion cannot be grounded or criticized by outside reason. It's this autonomous system all of its own. Just like a sport, you actually have to take part to find out what it's all about. What we're really exploring here is an anti-realist approach to language. In this view, meaning is basically true for me. Religious faith isn't about proving some objective external reality. It's an affirmative decision to enter the game and find relative truth within it.
Asking for empirical scientific proof for the existence of the soul is literally like asking for the physical weight of a monopoly property in the real world. It entirely misunderstands the game you're analyzing.
So, part 4. What are the strengths of this theory? Why does this actually work?
While for starters, this theory offers some pretty powerful protections for religious language. First, we have non-cognitive meaning. It provides deep meaning to non-factual phrases like, I baptize you, or I love God, by focusing on their actual use rather than demanding empirical proof. Second, boundary setting. It keeps different forms of life safely separated. It stops the science language game from rolling in and unfairly judging the religion language game using totally inappropriate rules. And third, internal coherence. It allows complex religious ideas like the Christian Trinity to be understood as part of a dynamic, self-sufficient whole.
In practical, everyday reality, religious language is fundamentally an expression of belief. You truly have to be a participant in the game to fully grasp it. For instance, heavy theological words like atonement require the full reach of a believer's feeling that Jesus literally died for them to really understand the phrase's impact. It also perfectly explains distinct rituals. We instantly understand why someone removes their shoes before entering a mosque, but not necessarily a church. The forms of life, and therefore the rules of the game, are totally distinct.
But hey, it's not perfect. Let's hit part 5, the challenges and criticisms and where this theory falls short.
We definitely have to weigh those strengths against some pretty sharp critiques. First up, believers intend facts. When a religious person says, I believe in God, they generally intend that to be a cognitive statement. They reject the idea that they aren't stating an empirically verifiable, true proposition. They aren't just making a move in a non-cognitive game. Second, it's highly isolationist. If there's no crossover between games, Wittgenstein kind of implies there can be no meaningful conversations or debate between different groups of language users. And third, it's divisive. If every religion is just playing its own isolated game with its own distinct rules, it actively prevents communication between different faiths.
And that brings us to a really crucial point, the danger of extreme relativism. If Phillips is right, and the game of religious language requires absolutely no outside justification, this could easily lead to irrationalism and blind faith. I mean, how do we challenge harmful beliefs? If we can't critique a language game from the outside, this view could easily be used to justify extremism or superstition, totally shielding them from any rational criticism. In fact, some argue that non-believers might actually hold a more objective and therefore better understanding of religious language precisely because they're looking at it from the outside.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. If religion is just this completely isolated language game, doesn't that fail to provide an adequate meaning for the word God? I mean, how can we ever universally define it? Does treating religious language like a game save it from the harsh rules of science, or does it entirely isolate believers from reality and shut down meaningful global debate? That is the ultimate tension of Wittgenstein's theory, and it's exactly what you should be evaluating next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always look closely at the rules of the games we're playing.